my friends of Cosmic Agency, my name is Gosia. I'm going to leave you here a short introduction to this video, short because the video is quite long, so I don't want to waste your time here rambling, but I just want to say that I really like this video. I know we talked about the densities and how, as Yazhi explains, they don't exist. They are states of mind. They are not places. So here she's going to deepen this a little bit more, and I really love the example of the images she used, because based on these images you will understand to the perfection, I think, what she means, that we are not just of 1D or another. We are fragmented, scalar, multidimensional beings, and we occupy and we perceive different ranges of the Ds at once, so we cannot be locked or limited to just 1D. This is going to be perfectly understood based on her example. And later Robert asked a question. The question is about how, for example, we can see you. If, for example, you come down, we're going to see you. And supposedly we are not supposed to see what's above 3D. That's theories. And you are supposedly of 5D, we can see you. But somehow why can't we see those astral entities that are supposedly in 4D? So how is that possible? So that's going to be explained. And later I have a question actually that was from someone, and that was from the video about Venus still. Someone was asking, well, how come if from here we can see only 60%, the 3D part equivalent of 5D, then how come we don't see from Earth with telescopes and all, how come we do not see that third part, that 60% of what's there, like plants and vegetation? All we see is just some acids and gases and nothing there. So that's going to be explained as well. And later Robert asks about what happens to Taygetans when they come down here. Can they reproduce? What happens to their density level? And then I asked a question that was burning me inside for quite some time. I didn't quite capture it. It's a question a bit reverse. I'm asking what happens to the people who get extracted and get taken outside of Earth, beyond Van Allen belts, and supposedly you're supposed to be activated. Your telepathy is activated, your genetics is restored, memories come back, etc. So I'm asking why, if these densities are not places but states of mind, why this is not happening already here to people or to myself, for example? Why this will happen only if I go outside of Van Allen bands? So this means it has to do something at least with the place you are in. So yes, he explains that as well. And then at the end, Athena Swaruu is also offering more information about how she perceives the densities, her and Yazhi, how they perceive the densities, because Taygetans, that's a little bit of a different story. They are connected to Taygetans, Athena and Yazhi, but they are not officially Taygetans anymore. And then the curious fact at the end that Athena will mention, Yazhi, she can see elementals, those creatures of nature, there in the forest, somewhere in the mountains, but Athena cannot see them. Okay, so it's not for everyone to see them. But here the fun fact is that the spaceship can see them with its sensors. It can detect their presence, and they can even CGI how they look, because the sensors, they can pick up the mass and the gravity. I don't know exactly what it was, but the mass movement, and they can draw a picture for you of what they look like, those elementals. So that's quite interesting. Anyway, I'm leaving you with the video. Enjoy it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye. Yazhi.
A question, so that I don't forget, because people will ask. The Ds are states of mind, okay? As an example, the 5D can see the 3D, and, from what I understand, according to your degree of awareness and capacity to interpret things from 3D, you cannot see the 5D or the whole 5D because you cannot decode it with your mind. My question is, the parasitic astral larvae, the beings of the lower astral, have a mental state higher than that of the 3D people. That is why they see us and why we do not see them. But how is it possible that we can see, as an example, the 5D Taigetans, but are unable to see the parasitic larvae of the lower astral? That is not very clear to me. I do not know how to explain it to the public.
For stellar navigation, the physical world can be represented with a numerical gradient that represents frequencies from less to more. The entire physical world, galaxies, constellations, solar systems, planets, places on the planets, everything, no matter where it is, can be represented that way. With a low frequency gradient system that progressively advances upward in frequency to the highs and super highs. A numerical value is assigned to a particular place, a numerical value that represents a frequency to the extent that a particular species uses. Humans use hertz or megahertz, for example. In this case, the system is a gradient from low to high, as in a tape measure, where from one point to another point on that tape measure, you could say that it is a density. From a certain frequency to a certain other frequency, it could be said that it is 3D or 5D or any D. But this is arbitrarily based on artificial ideas and concepts, and never on a real physical barrier that exists between the so-called densities. In other words, densities as such are a mental construction, an arbitrary artificial idea destined to try to explain something very complex with simple concepts. So, in these circumstances, the densities are linear, with a predictable gradient from low to high. But this only works inside or with computers, like those of a spacecraft that must navigate through space using frequency maps and not positions on a traditional map. At the moment in which we begin to transfer the concept of densities with that linear form to the consciousness of a being with thought, a being with a connection to the source, a being with a soul, things stop working in a linear way. Things are no longer linear because sentient beings connected to source are not linear. They do not think linearly, and their consciousness is not contained in a specific range of frequencies. This class of beings that are fractals of the source, that are the source itself from the position of each one of them, are highly scalar beings who think on many levels and have many levels of consciousness, not just one. It is here where a being can be observing only the wrongly called terrestrial 3D with his eyes and bodily senses, and at the same time have high and complex thoughts that do not correspond to that density, but to a much higher one. At the same time, this kind of beings with souls have unconscious and subconscious functions that also work in a scalar way, maintaining communication and transfer of data from senses that are not the traditional five, including those that come from other misnamed timelines of himself and other beings like himself. So the thoughts of beings connected to Source are not contained in a single frequency range, but are fragmented in many places, levels of perception, and levels of densities by mathematical frequency assignment as described above, all working together randomly within his mind, creating a complex soup of frequencies, perceptions, and existential planes within his perception of being a conscious entity. So, trying to put the perception of beings with connection to the Source within a linear perception scale, like a tape measure, is highly reductionist and does not reflect objective reality. So, the beings living in a society where they coexist will be able to coexist and will be able to share many aspects of their world, from the material side or experience of material life common to all. But that part of perception or understanding of reality will only be partial and never total. They only live together in a so-called existential density by mutual agreement, just because of that, not because of anything external to them. Everything is mind and has always been mind. But the mind is not contained in a single frequency range, as I have explained above. It is fragmented. So parts of the realities of one person may be concordant with other parts of the reality of another person, but in other aspects they do not agree. So, observing the same person, they have parts of their understanding, perception, consciousness, reality that are within what in a purely illustrative way I will call a density, like 3D or 5D or any other D. So that person will have fragments of their consciousness and understanding in various densities and in a disorderly way, because that is how the thoughts of beings who are aware of their own existence and connected to the Source are. Map of the consciousness of a being with the soul with connection to the Source. It is not localized. It is not linearly formed. It does not have clear barriers that delimit where that being ends and another begins, or where other beings begin, since the very concept that there are other beings is again just an idea within a mind. For example, the perception of a being with the soul here could be represented as in that his consciousness is in 3D, green, and other parts of his consciousness are in 5D, red, and other parts are in other densities, higher, blue. The consciousness of beings with the soul is not contained in a single point. This causes beings with connection to the Source to have disordered perceptions that cannot be catalogued into a single density. And in the same way, this causes each person to have a different capacity to perceive what is outside the perceptual range of what is understood as objective reality, such as terrestrial 3D. So, transferring this to perceive other realities, to perceive Venus, for example, it will depend on the filter of consciousness and understanding of each person. And it will not be able to be represented in a linear way, as in the case of a star map, because beings with connection to the source and awareness of their own existence are not linear, and they are not computers. And this explains all the discrepancies of who can see or perceive what from what point. So that someone should be able to see whatever from 5D or 3D or whatever D doesn't apply. I insist, there are no densities, there are no separations. A soul, as such, does not exist. That is a construction entertained by a mind, a tulpa or egregor. We are all connected to the degree that there are no fixed or solid barriers or limits that demarcate where one person ends and another begins. You asked if the parasitic astral larvae, the beings of the lower astral, have a mental state higher than that of the 3D people, and if that is why they see you and you do not see them. Just in a simplified way. They are not really seen because they are beyond the understanding of the people who cannot see them. This is outside of a linear frequency scale. If someone does not know about norms, does not know how or does not have the necessary background to see norms, they will not see them, and other people will see them. It has nothing to do with a fixed frequency scale from less to more, just that from a computer this could be represented with a numerical value of frequency, but that is not applicable to the direct perception of a being with the soul.
We are all connected to the degree that there are no fixed or solid barriers or limits that demarcate where one person ends and another begins. My goodness, what an explanation. It is very well understood. Thank you.
It's just that, where does a wave begin? At the base? Where at the base of the wave? The same with people connected to the source. The concept that you are separated comes as an idea transfer from entertaining the idea that you are only one body. And that body is easy to define where it begins and where it ends. It is seen as separate from other physical bodies. But we speak of consciousness here, not of matter, that has been only a manifested mirror of a series of ideas to which that being is attached. Souls do not exist. They are only defined as the group of ideas with attachments that you hold within a memory frame. Using me as an example, I am attached to the idea that I am a female, that I have a name that defines me, Sofia Swaruu, Yazhi, that I weigh about 39 kilos, that I have long hair because it grew, that I have gray-blue eyes, that I like chocolate, that I am a girl of about 10 years old, And I am because I remember a mental sensory progression that only contains memory as Sofia Swaruu Yazhi for a decade. This is an example of hundreds of thousands or millions of attachments within a memory, which defines us as people and not as someone else. But they are just ideas. We are the source. There is only one soul, one whole. The rest are just ideas within that very mind. As I said to Gosha last night, it is as if we invented a group of fictional characters in our head. We animate them. We give them a defined personality. We give them a lot of mental energy and time to develop who they are. We end up loving our characters that only exist in our heads. We end up creating strong attachments to these characters. We know that if we don't animate them in our mind, they will cease to exist. So we feel responsible for keeping them alive. That is what we are. Characters within a great mind, within the source, being the source. And only a series of ideas limit who we are, and in a purely arbitrary way.
So what we could call the essence, the personality that defines us as an individual, that would be the ego. It would be an attachment to being something. Knowing that we are ideas of that same mind, that mind contemplates everything, integrates everything?
Yes, I just wouldn't say that it integrates it, because it would give the idea that it wasn't integrated before. It is just the source, and it has always been the source. The ego is the attachment to the ideas that define a person. But the ego comes with a strongly negative connotation, although it should not have it. I would use the concept of the self as the group of attachments based on ideas and concepts within a temporary memory framework, which define the concept that we are a particular person and not another. But as this is understood more and more, the barriers to your understanding of where you end and someone else begins fade, because you realize feasibly and definitively that we are not only all connected, but that we have always been the same person, separated only by easily collapsible ideas. If 3D is just a state of mind, why is it said that devices such as telescopes cannot see what is outside and only see up to number 3, 60% of what there is in Venus, for example, in its 5D state? But telescopes don't have mental states. They should be able to see everything as it is. The technological device only responds to its creator and his level of consciousness. Yet, there is a strong element of deliberate lies on the part of space agencies here. There are thousands of people around the world with civilian telescopes like the Celestrons who are reporting seeing things that shouldn't be there. They see how things are, but they don't say it, and sometimes they do. Even so, it depends on the mind of the observer, not on the device. the device will only give data that are congruent with its measurement systems, and from there, the interpretation of said data will depend on each person's consciousness. But I insist that in this case, there is a high degree of concealment of the objective truth observable from Earth. Someone has asked me the following. It has been said that the soldier on Venus would see only the 3D of Venus, so he should see an acid hell, because that is what is seen from Earth, supposedly. And it is said that only that is seen because it is a 3D part of it, and you can't see the rest. But you indicate that the soldiers see plants, vegetation, and inhabitants who they kill. From the 3D Earth, you can't see any of that. When they get there, they will see plants and palm trees like those on Earth, because they are the same plants and palm trees. Because, as we have already explained, living beings repeat themselves a lot on different planets, even being hundreds of light years from each other, because biology doesn't work as explained to people on Earth. So they will come to Venus and see familiar things, and they will then interpret that they are in a familiar place, Earth, until something unfamiliar comes to them, as happened many times in Vietnam, that elite soldiers of special forces report confronting beings of extraterrestrial appearance, Yautia, who had weapons and advanced technological devices, who are real beings.
What happens to the Taygetans coming down to Earth, to this 3D density? Will they be compatible with humans? Is their DNA degraded?
When a Taygetan is in 3D for a long time, they become compatible. It can be seen as degradation of DNA, but it is not degradation, it is density adaptation. I know that there are no densities, but yes, there is a collective unconscious, which is what defines a density. They are ideas. Still, ideas affect what you perceive as physical.
It becomes compatible even though they have one brain mass, or does the brain divide itself, like the human one? I mean, would the Taygetans transform inside, like their organs?
It doesn't split if it's a step down, but their children, yes, if they have them with a human. Organs are not transformed or changed, they only degrade or age.
For instance, if Rigel were lost on Earth without technology, would his DNA degrade, and he could have a family once his DNA is degraded?
It would take 7 years, but yes.
But the child would be human.
It is only a possibility that he could have children, because the ET mindset is very strong and sustains the DNA. That factor is missing. To degrade DNA, you need to become matrix as well. The mind is very strong and keeps you as what you decide to be. That is why people who are in 3D that come out of terrestrial 3D take 3D with them to Venus, for example. The same as someone 5D takes their 5D with themselves. One question. From what I understand, Taygetans cannot have children with humans, no? So what children are you referring to? Only after a long time and getting lost in the matrix Could someone have children? Could, because it doesn't happen in most cases. It depends on the mind and the matrix of each person, on how much they are immersed in the 3D agreements. But generally, there is no reproduction, because DNA is different. It is not all or nothing. But if I have to use percentages, I would say that only 4% will reproduce, the rest of the 96% will not.
Thank you, Yazhi. Now, I have a question that is a bit reverse, about someone leaving the Earth. I know that the Ds are mental states, but we also know that when people are extracted outside of Van Allen, supposedly things get activated, memories, heightened senses, enhanced genetics. Why? If it's not about the place. I think something then has to do with the place, right? If not, why would memories be activated there and not from here? And genetics improving and all that, telepathy, etc. How can we answer this?
The lunar frequencies seem as though they have a lot to do with density, but rather, I see the Van Allen bands as a fence or as a barrier not to pass if you do not have the technology, not so much to do with densities. So, what activates your DNA is your mental state, the realization that you live something complex, different. So, you are also freeing yourself from connections and mental agreements of the 3D. But I also see a separation or cut of the psychic network that interconnects all human beings and living beings on Earth. Because there is one. Those are agreements, yes, but being in the space among others that look like you breaks the agreements, because you no longer live by the rules of the Earth, and that is very strong as a mental activation.
Okay, but we from here already know, now and here, that we are experiencing something complex. We don't have to be on the ship to know. And still, all those things do not get activated yet. So there is something here in this place that does not let us be what we would be once outside. Okay, terrestrial psychic network could be an explanation, yes.
One thing is to just know it, another is to live it. It is intertwined, yes, yet it just does not have the strength to break with the 3D agreements, although it can. DNA is a physical manifestation, a concentrated mirror of an idea, of consciousness, of memory. Activating DNA means activating memory, not just physical, and not only accelerating healing, for example, because the entire cellular process is accelerated by the activation of DNA, and that is only in low orbit. In high orbit or in interstellar space, other planets, it is stronger.
Well, but it should happen to us already from here, because of the ideas that we already carry. But it still does not happen, because we are on Earth, so our state of mind doesn't cause these changes here, or not fast. So it has to do with being there.
Because what you know intellectually is not enough. It could be, and it is enough, but even to your frustration, your activation is not yet complete. Or else, Gosha would clearly have changes to make her look as she does here, and it is not the case. You are still under matrix agreements. It hurts, but it's the truth. Because the collective unconscious affects you. Exactly. So it's because of being on Earth. So in this sense, the place does matter, because the psychic network of all others affects you. So it is not just your individual state of mind, but also those around you. Yes, from that point of view, yes. But the effect is not physical. It is deep psychological. Yes, those around you affect you. But with enough mental strength, you can transcend even that. Everything is still ideas in your head. If you are in a terrestrial dump, believing that you are in a ship with everything around you stimulating that, and you believe it 100%, then if you act accordingly, it affects you as if you were outside. Okay, and the human psyche does not reach outside the Van Allen bands? Everything gets activated there? Yes, it reaches, because you bring it with you. That's why it is not immediate at once, but through a process. And how long it lasts depends only on you. And it is temporary and relative to you. But they are all ideas. But within the framework of influence of those ideas, yes, where you are on Earth does affect you. But that is not definitive or physical. It is still psychological. Because there you also have an affinity in frequencies with the people around you. There, in an energy matrix called the terrestrial biosphere. People, everything that lives, is interwoven, interconnected. You have to break that bond with something very strong, stronger than just having new non-matrix ideas. Swaruu X, Athena. Before I start, remember that some of my concepts are not the same ones of Taygeta specifically. Remember, I am not Taygetan. Connected to them, yes, but different now, with a different mindset and thinking. I see the 3D, 5D labels as human-made concepts, reflecting human mind and thinking. Reductionist, and attempt to convert something very big and unmanageable into bite-sized pieces. Reflection of a mind stuck in dualistic thinking. I see as a valid point of observation or of view to understand that there is a physical universe creating its opposite, the not physical universe, especially while reasoning about these subjects from within a current ongoing incarnation. From the point of view of my and Yazhi's understanding, there is no such physical universe, being that everything is astral, for lack of a better term, where the agreements of perception are the ones that make up a conceptual frame used to place a limit or a series of boundaries to be able to think in terms of physical and not physical. So the type of experience an individual will have depends only on its frame of understanding. Notice I am using individual and not soul, because that is another term full of problems. So we could see the so-called physical universe as seen from within a body, thought or perceived as made up of something. But then, according to Yazhi and I, all the concepts that make up a soul, an individual being anywhere it may be, means it has or holds the concept of me, of self, I, or ego. This means it still functions in some degree of duality, meaning it knows itself to be something and not something else. And that concept of me that individual holds, we could argue, would be a body in itself. So the concept of ego, of the I, will be a body of sorts. However compelling the physical may be, especially the physical body, from our understanding, it is as real as any other concept of ego, I, body, being in the astral or wherever it may be. And its solidity is only an illusion based on agreements. Okay, density labels. This is how we see that for us, and as we perceive things to be, both mentally and through instrumentation, and also through direct travel and its characteristics, there is only one reality mass. Immense so much, so it collapses all the capacity of every being to fully grasp what it is. Anything that defines it falls short of its real nature. For example, the concept of eternity, of always has been and always will be, because it functions outside of known concepts of time and space. After having said this disappointing sentence, I can add how we see things. One mass made up of gravity that is a flow in the ether, that causes a soup of potential energy that can be understood as made up of frequencies that go from very low to very high, getting lost in both directions, into the unfathomable and the unmeasurable. So, where we live is a soup of energy frequencies, and what each individual person can perceive as reality is determined by its own frequency. That is, people, individuals, do not live in a density as such, like 3D or 5D, but live in whatever part of it they can perceive as a range of frequencies. So I could argue that each individual has or holds its own density. It creates its own density of existence. And the people who are perceived as coexisting in a density are only sharing agreements of perception that would be similar to those of the first individual, yet never exactly the same. The problem while explaining other concepts in a video, for example, is that this may be too complicated for most people to understand. So we have been wrongly still using 3D and 5D as examples, but knowing it is wrong, and we know it is time to evolve. No 3D as such, no 5D as such. We just share enough agreements to be able to coexist in some degree. So do not see any densities as such, only one mass of infinite energy. And we understand that it is the awareness, the mind, and the consciousness of each individual who will make up, create, or manifest a density a reality and all its laws and characteristics, but as a realm cannot exist without the individual, the observer. All this, it is a case of multiple points of view, because stating that everything is astral would be from one expanded point of view, but from another down-to-earth practical point of view, you clearly can make the distinction between astral and physical. Both points of view are correct from one or another perspective. The problem here is that people who do understand why everything is astral can understand why others only see physical versus astral. And those last people cannot understand why everything is astral from a more expanded point of view. Generalizing, of course. Learning for yourself is the only way to increase your perception and understanding of everything. Therefore, expanding your boundaries of real and not real, and of your own private density as a final consequence. All I have been doing personally is learning. The only added problem to discuss with all mentioned above is the undeniable presence of creatures that are not visible to us all from the physical, yet they are there. For example, elementals, shadow people, crypto animals, that, in my understanding, are simply outside the range of our perception, as we cannot see all there is. Again, I think they are difficult to precise where they are, because they are in perception not there when you walk through a forest, yet they can throw rocks at you and stones, so they are physical. And if it helps, or make things even more confusing, a ship can see them using gravity imaging and process an image for you to see them. A ship's sensors can detect elementals and even CGI them for you, superimposing their image onto the video reel of the forest you are in. And they are very much like how they have been represented since eons ago. You can see the leaves and twigs under their feet bend under their weight as they creep along cautiously, thinking that they cannot be seen. And as the ship is detecting them with gravity anomaly sensors, you can therefore see that they have mass. Not entirely happy with this image, but there isn't much to choose from. They are there in the physical, but outside the capacity of your body and perceptual agreements to see. But they can throw a rock at you, hurt you. Yazhi can see them with her naked eyes. I cannot. Although she says they are not clear. They are like shadows with some shapes and features in them. The gravity sensors do give you a lot more details. You expand your perception and understanding of reality, working on yourself as a process. Only you can know in what direction to go. The more you know and understand, the more you will perceive, and then that will change your frequency of thought, mind, and that your reality. But it's a long process. It would also mean that when someone no longer is compatible with one place, set of agreements as seen by a collective unconscious, it is time for such individual to evolve, not to return to said realm in favor of a more compatible one.